we're going to go over the page editor. The page editor is a quintessential part of Unstack because realistically, hosting our web pages, blogs, and landing pages is our bread and butter here. So let's break down how to utilize the page editor to its fullest advantage. First off, there are two ways to create a page. You can either begin with a new page, which would be a blank page that doesn't currently have any template components in it, or you can begin with one of our templates. Our templates are an ever so quickly growing library of things that our designers have created to make it easier for you to iterate on pages. Today, we'll begin with a blank page so that we can go over specifically what we're building with. Now that we have the editor open, we'll talk about what type of editor we have here. It's a component-based editor. What that means is that pages are comprised of components stacked on top of each other, and the customizations that you make to a page happens component by component. So when you're thinking of designing something or making a specific alteration to a page, you'd actually do those alterations in each component rather than being at the page level. This makes it a lot more granular and a lot easier to adjust small things within your page without messing up the entire page. So let's first jump into our first component type, which will be media. And we'll talk about what the different options that appear in the toolbar are for customizing that component. To add a new component, we'll simply click this. If one already existed here, we'd click the Add Component button, and then click it from this drawer that opens. In our help documentation and other things, you'll hear a lot of terminology like that. Drawer, toolbar, or anything like that. We'll go over where those exist and what that means. But a drawer is anything that pops out from the left or right. So, for example, if I click this eye icon and open the page settings, this is a drawer that holds the page settings. Now we're going to talk about the toolbar. The toolbar appears directly above the active component. The way to tell which component is active is because it will be outlined with this blue border. Here in the toolbar is where we'll make those customizations we were talking about. So let's work left to right and talk about what each of these options do. First, we have section height. This can either be content height or screen height. Content height will accommodate the content within the section and the spacing that you set in the next toolbar option. Whereas screen height will fill the most common desktop screen size. Then we have layout. Layout is a very underused tool that can completely redesign how a component looks and realistically makes it so that every single component has sub-options that can completely customize the styling. Layout for media could be full media, where it fills the entire component, centered media, media right, media left. This H right here is to toggle a header. Toggling a header is a great feature if you'd ever like to put text or buttons above the component. Once it's on, you'll notice that the H will turn blue. If I'd like to shut that back off, I'll click it again to turn the H white. Within this toggled header, I can add some text. I like Unstack training. Then once I've added that text, I could use this lightning icon, or as we call it, the action icon, to add a button or a text link. If I'd like to edit that text, I would simply select it with my cursor, and then I could edit it between changing either what tag it is, H1, H2, or H3. I could change the font from one of the 4 fonts that we'll select in the Styles Manager. I could adjust its sizing, adjust its color, make it bold, make it italics, give it a stylistic underline, make it a quote, or any of the other options that appear here. I can also hyperlink it utilizing our smart linking feature, which we'll talk about when we go over buttons. Let's toggle this header off for now so that we can clean up this component. Now we'll talk about spacing. When we talked about component height, we talked about content height. And I said that content height would accommodate the elements within the component and the spacing that you set. This is where you'll set that spacing. This is where you'll set how much space should be above, below, to the left, and to the right of the elements within that component. So if I wanted to add a taller margin for the top, I'd simply up my top spacing. This is really good for styling your component to make it either more spacey or make everything more compact. If you want two components to be very close to each other, simply adjust the bottom component's top spacing to 0 and the top component's bottom spacing to whichever spacing you'd like. Then we have max width. Max width controls how wide a component can go. No worries about mobile optimization because we'll automatically manage that for you. So when you're doing this, just consider how wide you like it to go on desktop. This is in pixels, so 1200 pixels is standard. You can also take everything out to have it go auto, or you can constrain it to 600 pixels or any pixel size that you'd like to put in here. Next up, we have alignment. Alignment is how the component aligns in totality. So we could have this aligned to the right, aligned to the left, or aligned center. This is usually used for stylistic options in differing components and is beneficial whenever you're trying to design something to align in a specific manner. Then we have background. Background is called background and not just background image because it actually can comprise of either an image, video, or a GIF. So let's go ahead and click this icon and look at the media library that will open. This is our media library. You'll notice that I have three options on my left sidebar right here. I have images, videos, and Unsplash. Let's talk about what all of these mean. First off, I did say GIFs, and you're not seeing an option for that here. That's because a GIF is technically an image. So when you want to upload a GIF, you would simply upload it under images. However, we do suggest that instead of GIFs, you upload videos, since the browser will actually load faster, and since videos have a different type of optimization manner, which allows for the page to still load quickly. But to upload an image or video, we can simply click this plus button right here, and then select it from one of our files. For videos, we do currently have a 25 megabyte file size constraint, but that may update in the future. So please check help.unstack.com to see what the current file sizing that we accept are. Now we have Unsplash. Unsplash is where things get pretty interesting and very fast. Unsplash is a stock image site holding over 1 million images that you can utilize for free. The best part about this integration is there's no need to go to their site and download it and then re-upload it to Unstack. You can simply type in the term that you're looking for here, hit the Enter key, and it will automatically sort and pull in all of the stock images that match that keyword. Then you can simply select one of them, click the Save button, we'll download it into your media library, and we'll add it onto the page. Now that we have an image here, let's edit this image. Mind you, this could also be a video, but for this example, we'll use an image. I'll once more click this icon, and since it's blue, rather than opening the media library, it will now open my two sub-toolbars. Let's go over toolbar by toolbar. So we just finished on the main toolbar by expanding these two sub-ones. So let's begin with the first sub-toolbar. This is where we'll adjust how that image will display. First, we'll go over the image display options, which is cover. Cover will expand the image so that it covers the entire component. Contain will make it so that the entire image is visible within the component. And then grid will repeat the image so that it fills the component. We suggest cover, however, whichever one suits your fancy is perfect for you. Then we have alignment. First, we'll talk about vertical, and then we'll go over horizontal. Vertical alignment is where you would like the image to be mainly aligned. So you can have it aligned left, aligned to the center, or aligned right. Same thing goes for horizontal, but of course, different options of aligned to the top, aligned to the center, or aligned to the bottom. This is beneficial if there's a key point of that image you want to see. For example, I want people to know that there are sticky notes on that wall. So I'll have it aligned to the top so that I know whoever loads this, those sticky notes will be visible. Then we have swap and remove. And as you might guess, swap is when you want to change out the image or video that you're currently using, and remove is when you want to remove the background media altogether. Then we have scroll speed, or commonly known in the design world as parallax. This is where we can adjust the scroll speed of this specific image. So you'll notice if I put it to 0.25x, when I scroll past it, it'll scroll at a different speed than my actual scroll to give it a bit more of a designer feel. This is great for now, so let's move forward within the toolbar. Next, we have background color. Background color is a really great option here, and personally something that I favorited from the beginning, because background color and background media can coexist. The best part is background color takes precedent over background media, meaning if this image is too dark for me, I can lighten it up by adding on some opacity of a background color. Or in the versa, if it's too bright, I can add on a darker coloration to tone it down a bit so that my text is more visible. This is great because you can set any color in hex, RGB, or one of the defaults that will set up in your Styles Manager. And you can also control its opacity using this dial right here. You can go between 0 and 100. And you'll notice right here showing me percentage. This is the opacity percentage for that specific color that we're setting. Now that we have this all set up, let's talk about A/B testing. A/B testing is where you can test two variables against each other. We have some great documentation on this, and we'll also cover this in its own section, since it's pretty advanced and it also requires some more content in this component before I can correctly display it. Then we have anchor linking. Anchor linking is usually best for when you have a one-pager. So if I had a one-pager and I wanted to link around the section, I could set up anchor links, calling this hero or about. And then when people go to this URL, I would simply append the pound sign and then whatever anchor link I put in here to push them to that component automatically. Next up, we have dark background and light background. This is used to compensate all of the elements within the component. So that I can demo this, I'm going to add some text to this component. Now when I click this, since currently you'll notice that it says dark text for light background. And I think we can all agree that this background isn't exactly light anymore. So let's adjust this to light text for a dark background. And you'll notice that all of my elements within my component adjust so that they're more visible on a darker background. Now that we've covered the main toolbar, we'll go over the sub-toolbars in a second, but let's cover the tools that are on the outskirts of this toolbar. First off, over here, this tag right here, it's not a button. It's actually simply an identifier. So if you contact support, or if you're looking through our help docs and you know what component type you're currently using, you can look over here and the name of it will appear. Over on the right side, these up and down arrows are how you can actually adjust it throughout the page. To demo this, I'm going to add a quick component directly below this. So if I wanted to put this second on the page, I would simply click the down arrow and adjust it to be the second component on the page. I can do that however many times I would like. Then I can use this icon to duplicate the section. I can also click hide, which will actually not hide this component, but it will hide the toolbar. So it will deactivate this section simply from the toolbar. It won't now not show on the website, it'll still show. What the hide button does is it just hides the toolbar. If I no longer want this component, I'd click this trash icon. The trash icon will delete the component. Let's move forward and now talk about the elements editing. So we talked about how this is a component-based editor. Within each component are different elements. For the media component, as an example, there's the image element and the text element. These are two things directly next to each other within the component. So we're able to directly edit them too. First, so that we can demo this properly, let's add an image to the image element. We can use this one of people sitting at a desk. We're getting very businessy today. When selecting an image, you'll notice that I have a sidebar right here. Within this sidebar, I can add some alt text. Alt text is extremely important for those who are visually impaired or for Google search results. Of course, make sure that you're doing it for both. Make sure that you're clearly describing the image for those who are visually impaired, and you're using clear text so that SEO can also rank that image. We'll say people working at their laptops. Next up is image optimization settings. Unstack loads your pages blazingly fast. And to do that, we have to optimize some images because realistically, those are really large file sizes. However, image optimization isn't always appropriate for images. So we added the ability to adjust those settings. Let's talk about what these settings are. We automatically will resize your image for the space that it's filling. I always suggest you leave resizing on, unless you're absolutely positive and I've used the preview link to make sure that it works without it. But when in doubt, I suggest leave resizing on, since it just makes the image properly fit. The one thing that is a debatable option is leaving optimization on. Optimization can sometimes degrade the quality of super high resolution images. Standard images realistically won't be impacted by this, but extremely high resolution screenshots or GIFs may be impacted by your optimization settings. So if you need to shut those off, you can either down it to simply optimize and not next gen optimize. Next gen being where it's a little bit higher of a level of optimization for loading, but optimize will do the job and it will allow the image to be a bit clearer if it's an extremely high resolution image. Then resize only will entirely shut off optimization for the image. I really suggest that you only use these settings when needed. I would not suggest that you always shut off optimization simply because you believe that it's necessary. Always preview and make sure that optimization is actually making a negative impact before shutting it off. Because realistically, if the image is still clear with optimization, always leave it on since it will help your SEO ranking and it will help the page load for the user experience. Lastly, on this sidebar, we have link to, which is optional. If you leave this blank, a link will not be added. However, you can either add a page name or a URL here. Smart linking is a great feature that we have. Smart linking is the ability to link to other assets within your Unstack portal. That could be a page, blog, PDF, landing page, etc. So to link to that, I'll simply type in the page name. You'll notice that it will provide me a dropdown that I can select from. If I need to type in a whole URL, I could enter that there rather than entering a page name. But we'll click Save since this looks good for now. Now that we have this image, we can properly demonstrate adding different section settings here. We can add a foreground image. A foreground image is styling this. So I could add something like this, which would add a foreground image on top of the image. I'm going to remove this just for now, but you'll notice that the settings are exactly the same. I just don't have something proper to demo this just yet. I can add a background image, which isn't very popular with image elements. It's more popular with the entirety of the component. Then we have background color. This can go directly behind the image. You'll notice that it will fill the space that is currently outlined in blue. Then you have spacing. Spacing controls spacing on top of, to the right, bottom, and left of the element. Max width will control the maximum width that that image can span to. This could go 400 pixels, 500 pixels, and beyond. This can always be adjusted to your necessity. Then we have alignment. So say you need to make the image smaller and you want to align it in a specific method. You can do that by changing its alignment settings. Change it to align to the left, right, or center. Animation is also a great tool for adding some design to your web pages, especially on load. You can have it animate in from the bottom, left, top, right, or expand. Then we have box shadow. Box shadow will add a shadow directly behind the image. We can also add some border radius, so we can add some rounding to the corners. The higher your border radius number, the more rounded the corners will be. Next, we have the text component. You'll notice that everything in this editor is something we've already gone over, except for this text alignment. We can align the text center or to the left. The last thing we'll go over now is editing text itself. When editing text, simply select the text you'd like to edit, toggle it between H1, H2, or H3. You can change between one of the 4 fonts that you have set in your Styles Manager, adjust the height here, adjust the color, make it bold, make it italics, add a stylistic underline, a quote, code block, or you could put it into one of our multiple list options. You could also remove all text styling. Then if we need to hyperlink it, we'll simply click this chain icon, and then we could use that smart linking once more to deliver this hyperlink. If I need to have this open in a new tab, I could simply click this icon here, turn it blue, and then this link will open in a new tab rather than the same tab the person's already in. We also have buttons. Buttons are the same thing that we just did for hyperlinking. So you get the gist. To add a button, simply hit the lightning icon and then select which type of button you'd like to utilize. Now let's talk about forms. Forms are incredibly important within your Unstack site. So let's talk about setting one up. To set one up, first you're going to have to give it a name. Everything needs a name here so that we can keep organized. Then you'll set up the fields that you'd like to collect. You can either use one of our standard contact fields or you can use a generic field and customize it specifically for what you'd like to collect with that form. Then you can change the submit button, so enter or whatever you'd like to call it. You can adjust the on submit action, which could be show a message, redirect to a page, post to a URL, or get to a URL. I'm just going to submit a thanks message. Then I could show this form without a background, or I could add a white background. Adding white background just makes the form pop out just a bit more. And those are the basics of setting up your forms. Now those form submissions will go into your CRM, which we'll talk about later. Quick note is that forms cannot coexist with buttons. They can only coexist with a text link. So if a button already exists in that component, you can't add a form on top of it. You can only have a button or a form, but you can have a form and a text link. It's a bit confusing, but if you need help figuring it out, the help documentation will go over that. That wraps up the basics of our editor. When editing, always explore different types of components. We have media, callouts, text, logos, and many more, and we're ever so quickly expanding. Before we sum up here, I'm going to go over quickly a little differentiation between a media and a callout section. For callouts, to add more, simply click this plus or minus button. And if you'd like to use full images instead of icons, click the layout option and click full images, or toggle it back to icons. Everything else will remain the same, and we've completely gone over the editor experience. If you need any help, reach out to help@unstack.com. But that will sum up your editor for today. Welcome back. Now we'll go through landing pages and page settings. Mind you, when we cover landing pages, we'll mostly be talking about strategy, since we just talked about the editor, and the editors are the same for web pages and landing pages. So let's talk about landing page strategy. We suggest landing pages are used when it's a squeeze page or specific deal content. Landing pages should not be what your website is comprised of. It should realistically be an exclusive piece of content that is for a sub cohort of people. Or it could be a sign up page or a contact us, but realistically, those pages are best as marketing site pages. Let's jump into the page settings so that we can talk about the differentiation between a landing page and a website page. First, in page settings, we'll go over the Unstack name. This is the internal name that you'll use internally to be able to locate this page later. So make it something that internally you'll know. Then we have title. Title is the public facing name that will appear in the browser tab. Then you have URL. This is where people will go to find that page. Description, which will be used for SEO and just identification of this page. And then we have header and footer layout specific to landing pages. A header could be a full header, no header, or just a landing page header, which is just the logo centered on the page. The footer could be a landing page footer, which is what you see here, a full footer, or no footer. And then danger zone is where you can toggle search engine visibility on or off. When this is checked, it's off. When it's unchecked, it's on. Search engine visibility is when Google can find this page. So if it's a private deal that you want to make exclusive to a cohort of people, make sure that you shut this off so nobody can Google it to find this deal. Then, when you're editing this page, if it's a draft and you'd like to view how it would look on the real site, click the preview button. This will open an exact preview of the page you're currently editing, so you don't have to publish it to see how it's doing. That'll wrap up the page settings that I wanted to go over here. Next up, we'll talk about blogs. Now we're talking about the blog. The blog is the powerhouse of your SEO. Blogging is a major strategy when it comes to building SEO presence and ranking on Google. Make sure that your blogs are also contentful. Google rates quality over quantity. So make sure that your blogs are on par with what your business is structured around, and they're also well built out. Now that we step away from strategy, we'll talk more about the actual pieces that go into blogging. So let's talk about what we're viewing on this page. We're right now sitting on the blog index page, which can be located by going to the sidebar and clicking blog. You'll notice at the top here it says manage articles, and then we have categories, layouts, and settings. Before we actually get into the nicety of the blog editor, we'll first talk about your blog structure and how to set that up. First, let's talk about categories. Categories is how you can organize your blogs for your viewers, so they can read specific categories of blogs. Each category will have its own listing page, so you can send people there to view all of the blogs in that specific category. Without further ado, let's toggle this open and talk about setting one up. You'll notice I don't currently have any categories for this blog just yet. So let's set one up together and talk about the different parts that we need to go over. When setting up a new category, you'll give it an Unstack name, which is the internal name. Let's call this News. Then you'll give it a title. You'll select what blog it will be related to, the category URL path, and then the category description. Then we'll click Create Category Only. You can also click Create Category and write one, but we'll write one in a minute. Now this category, whichever blogs are assigned to it, will sit on the listing page, located at the URL we set up for it, which was demo.unstacksite.com/blog/news. Now let's talk about layouts. Layouts are how you can make your blog seem more designer. First, we'll talk about category layouts, then we'll talk about article layouts. Category layouts are also used for the article listing page. This is the overarching page that shows all of the articles that you've published. So if the blue line is under category, we're currently editing the category listing page. You'll notice over here we currently have list selected. List is a pretty standard format that you'll see on sites like Medium. But to make this a more designer format, we can switch it over to grid. Grid shows a main top story that is fully displayed with its preview image and then all of the info about it over here. And then in a title card way, the rest of them are displayed at the number that you would like displayed. You can do 7, you can take it all the way up to however high you'd like, or you can make it as few as you would like. There will also be pagination so that they can click through other pages of articles. Now let's talk about article layout. This is what our categories will look like, but now we have to decipher how we want our articles to look. In article layout, we can set up a sidebar for CTAs, and we can also add custom code to the bottom of every single article page. First, let's talk about adding a CTA. We already explored the editor, so we won't go in depth on editing text here, but I could say subscribe to my newsletter. If I wanted to edit this text, I'd select it and then use the text editor. And then I could add a button, text link, or a form. We'll add a form. And I'll pull up a form that I've previously saved and click Save to render it to this page. Now that we've set up our layout, I'll click Publish. And now we'll be able to see this live on our blog site. Lastly, we'll go over settings for the entire blog, and then we'll jump into the blog editor. Settings for the blog go over the Unstack name, its title, the category URL structure, and the article URL structure. For article URL structure, you can do any of these. We suggest blog/article, but you can also do it more in depth if you'd like to. Then you'll set up the URL and the description. You can also have this blog hide from the search engine. But remember, that will only be for the actual listing page. It won't be for all of the articles within that blog. Now let's jump into the fun part. We're going to jump into the actual blog editor. And just like we did for pages, we'll begin by just creating a new article. You'll notice where it says add a header, this is where I'll type in my title. So I'll say Unstack Demo Blog. You'll notice that my CTA is permanently affixed here. And when I begin my post, a plus sign appears here. If I want to add an image to the top of this blog, I'll click the plus sign. And you'll notice that I'm opted with 3 different icons that I can select from: image, divider, and video. I can either add an image from my media library, I can add a stylistic divider, or I can add a video from YouTube, Vimeo, Wistia, or others. I'm going to select an image for now. I'll add the same sticky note image that we used before. And I'll remember to use my alt text. I'll click Save to insert it to the page. And now it'll be centered right on my blog. So let's start writing. Now that I've written some text, what I can do here is select this text to edit it. I can toggle it between H1, H2, and H3. I can change its font from the 4 fonts that we'll set up in the Styles Manager. I can adjust its size. I can change its font color. I can make it bold, make it italics. I can adjust its centering to be centered in the center or aligned to the left. I can also go to stylistic underline, make it a quote, make it a code block, or I can put it in a checklist format. Or if I don't like any of that, I can clear the text formatting. I can also add a hyperlink using either a smart link or a full URL. Those are the basics of the blog editor. I can also utilize this preview button to send it to a colleague to read over that doesn't have direct access to my Unstack account. So if I have a proofreader that I don't want to give a login to Unstack, but I'd like them to read over my blogs before they're released, I could use that preview link. Now that this blog looks pretty demo-ish, what I'll call done for today, I'm going to go into the blog settings and set up what we should configure. First, we'll make sure that its name looks good. We'll assign it a category, and we'll give it a description. Now, if I want to schedule this blog for a later date, under author date, I would simply set this in the future. Then I can give it a publish time. I'll click schedule this post for August 21st. You'll notice that the publish time is now enabled. So this will allow me to select the exact time that I would like this to publish at within the time zone that I set up in my settings page in Unstack. That looks good, so I'll click Publish Now with future date. And I'll click Save and Publish. Now when I go here, you'll notice that it says By Unstack Success in News. So if I go there, this is the specific listing page for this category. Those are the basics of your blog. We do hope this helped, and if you need any further assistance, feel free to go to help.unstack.com to search our help documentation. Hello, and welcome back. Now we'll go over the Elements Manager. The Elements Manager is where you'll manage your logos, header, footer, social share image, and your fave icon. Additionally, we'll manage our social links here too. First, let's talk about these logos. There are two that we ask for. This might be the first time that a platform asks you for two versionings of your logo. So let's talk about why we ask for that, and let's talk about what to upload there. First, we ask for two because we have dark and light background compensation, meaning if the background is lighter, we'll utilize your darker logo. And if the background is darker, we'll utilize your lighter logo when you manually set up that setting. So for light logo, this is going to be something that you want to be clearly visible on a white alike color, meaning a white background, an off-white background, or a light blue background. This logo should be darker and easily visible with contrast to a lighter background. On the versa, the logo for dark backgrounds should be easily visible on a black background, dark purple, dark blue, and all of those other black alike backgrounds to make sure that it's easily contrasting with those and very clearly visible to the viewer. Then we have your fave icon. Your fave icon is a 32 by 32 PNG. This will be used in the browser tab, right where that Unstack mark currently sits. Then you have your social share image. This is what we'll use when expanding text cards, link cards for sites like Twitter, Facebook, and other social medias where they'll expand that link. This is very beneficial, so make sure to upload something here. It could be an image that represents your company, or just anything that is representative of you as a company. Moving downward, we'll now go over your header and your footer. First, let's talk about header-footer strategy, then we'll talk about configuring it, and then we'll actually set one up together. Let's talk about first strategy. The header should be what somebody needs to see before they're ready to convert on your website. So this should be a very beneficial set of links that can help somebody make the decision that you're the right company for them. So if your company sells coaching sessions, it should be home, about me, experience or portfolio, and then a featured customers section where there are customer success stories and other things that will motivate somebody to feel like they can trust you enough to give you their information. Then your footer should be almost a duplicate of the header, but with some extra links. Those extra links being a privacy policy, terms of use, and anything that is not essential for a discovery phase, but maybe legally required or a nice to have exploration. Now that we've talked about strategy, let's talk about configuration. The header is extremely versatile, so let's go over how to adjust it. You'll notice right here in between the preview of my header and my footer, there's this white space. And within this white space in the middle, there's this configure header and then a gear icon next to it. When you hover this activates the toolbar that we can edit this with. Let's start from the left and work all the way to the right. First thing on the left is the background color. I'm going to change this to a darker background. Conveniently, the next one over are the settings for whether the background is dark or light. Obviously, I just made the background dark. So I'm going to turn that to telling the app that that background is dark. So now it will compensate by switching out with the logo that I selected for a darker background. Then we have alignment. Alignment is how I can change where that logo sits or where text links are available. Right now I have it on left align. With left align, I can add links next to the logo, right bound to the logo, and I can add a call to action link. I can also switch this to centered, where my links and my call to action are all centered, and I can add this to right bound, where you can't add a link next to the logo, and all links over here are right bound. Then we have logo height. This is how I can adjust my logo size. So if it's too small, I can use this to toggle it up. If it's too big, I can toggle it down. I can also adjust the positioning of my logo. This is useful for adjusting it so that the logo text is in line with the text of the navigation bar. But there's no necessity to use this just yet. Then padding. This is how to make the header larger or smaller. Then for your footer, we have the background color, background setting, and then the ability to toggle off Unstack branding, should you choose to do so. Now let's talk about building out my header navigation. First, I'm going to add the most obvious link, which is home. Then I'll add an about, a blog, and then for my call to action, I'll say contact us. These don't look in the right order, so let's move them around. First, I'm going to start by moving my home to the beginning of my navigation. Blog should probably be third, so I'll move that over there. Now, say I don't just have a blog and I also have a webinars page, I might not want to just confine myself to blog. So I'll use a new link and call it resources. I'll drag that all the way to the end, and then I'll use this tooltip to activate a dropdown. Within this dropdown, I'll add blog and webinars. Now, all of these are really great, but none of them link to anywhere. So let's set up some links. I'll do this by entering the page name I'd like to link to for each of these. And then for resources, I'll click this, set it to go to the blog, and then I believe on this account, we do have a webinars page. Then for contact us, I'll have that go to contact. Perfect. This all looks great. So now I'll publish it and refresh my page. And you'll notice that all of those stuck, and I now have a nice looking dropdown. Now let's set up my footer. First, we'll begin from the left side and move to the right side. First, I have these 2 lines of static text that I can input. I'll input my email, and then I'll input, let's keep it simple, and I'll input a phone number. Perfect. That looks good so far. Now let's set up a header. Let's set up a group for this. So I'll set up legal. And under this, I'll put in my privacy policy. And I'll put in my terms of use. This is where I'll link to those 2 policies. Then, if I want to add social links, I can simply scroll down to these icons down here, click on the one I'd like to add a link to, and type in its URL. Now, say I'm no longer using that social media and I want to toggle it back off, I'll simply click it again, hit the trash icon, and that will toggle off that social link. Those are the basics of the Elements Manager. I hope this helped. And if you need any more resources on this, feel free to go to help.unstack.com. Happy unstacking! Welcome back. Now we're going to go over the Styles Manager. This will most likely be the largest task that you'll go through with Unstack. But once it's set up, which is an amazing benefit of this. Let's talk about all of the sections before we dive in. First, we're going to go over colors, then fonts, then typography. Then we have buttons, which can also be considered calls to actions, lists, and then our header and footer. There's not too much, but there's a lot of resources we'll need to gather for this. First, we have our color palette. If you already have a website and you already have colors, you're going to want to use a tool like Colorzilla via Firefox or Google Chrome to find those colors from your website, or email help@unstack.com and request us to do it complimentary if you're on a paid plan. You'll want to fill out the brand primary, success, warning, dark color, light color, and dark text. To adjust these, simply click it, and then enter the hex or RGB code of that color. To add a new color without a preset, click the Add button and then add it in here. This will make it easy to select from when you're changing colors of elements. For example, when I click here, you'll notice that all of my preset colors and anything that I've saved appear here, so you don't have to remember or continuously copy and paste hex or RGB codes. Now for fonts, you can have up to 4. To swap one, just click it, and then select from our list of a lot of fonts that are pulled in from Google Fonts. If you have a specific font that's not listed here and it's within the Google Font directory, email us. Or if you have a custom font, go into our help documentation and utilize the code snippet for adding custom fonts to your website. You can have up to 4, or using this delete icon, you can have as few as 1, but you do need one default font. Then in typography, this is where you'll select for each H1 through P tag, and then blog H1 through blog P tag, a font family you'd like to use, a font weight, font size, line height, and color. Font family selects from one of the font styles that you selected up here. Font weight is how bold or lack thereof the font is, or the type for this specific use case since it's an H1. Font size is an REM, so you can adjust this. If you're currently using pixels on your current website and want those to transfer over, simply look up a pixel to REM converter so that you can have the exact number that you're supposed to use here. Line height is an EM, which is the same conversion factor as REM. Then color is simply the color of this text. Now, we talked about a lot today, compensating for a darker background. Typography does the exact same thing. So click this, and then you'll adjust the color that will be used when the background is darker. Do this for each one of these. Typography is something that you don't necessarily always have to get right on this first swing. You can always adjust this later on. And within our text editor, you can actually adjust text item by item within the editor. So feel free to mess around here and then just see how it looks on the live site. If you need help, schedule time with your customer success manager. Then for blog, we'll do the exact same thing. The blog, we usually use more of a serif type font. It just gives it a bit more of a news look. But that's just a stylistic option here at Unstack. If you don't like that and you like to stick with a modern era, feel free to utilize whatever font you're using on your main marketing website. Then just fill in the settings like we did above. If you need help for clarifications of these, I highly suggest going to help.unstack.com and looking over the written guide for the Styles Manager. Then, for highlight, this is that stylistic highlight I've referenced a few times in this long video, is the color that will appear below text that you'd like to stylistically highlight. Remember to, of course, create one for both a light background and dark background. This color can be anything that you select, but we do suggest that it pairs well with the font colors that you've already selected. Orange and yellow are two really great standard options here, but feel free to do whatever suits your fancy. Then we have quotes. Quotes, I suggest keeping this pretty standard with your P tag, but you can of course adjust the mark. Adjusting the mark includes adjusting the size of it and adjusting its color. Then for text, you can of course customize that to however you would like. I do suggest keeping it pretty in line with the fonts that you set up above, just for the look of your website, but if you'd like to go a little bit outside of that, feel free to do so. Then buttons. Buttons are a great thing because they're your call to actions. They're how you'll promote somebody to take a specific action that you'd like them to do. To do this, first set up its text. This is where you'll set up the font family, font weight, and font size. Then you'll also set a text color that's visible and the background color that we'll set in a second. Then you can also set a shadow for that specific font. I'll set this to orange so you can see how that shadow falls. It just makes it simply more visible on the background color that you set. Then we have shape. Shape is where you'll set the background color of your button, the height, and the shadow. Then we have border. This is where you can either set or put it to 0 so no border is set, and set the border radius. The higher this number, the more round. So if I set this to 100, it's a perfect pill shape. If I set it to 0, it's a rectangle. If I set it to 30, if I set it to 15, it's a nice rounded rectangle. Then I can set up my hover settings. This is what will happen when somebody hovers the button. I personally suggest keeping your background color and border color the same on hover and simply adjusting the opacity to be a lighter coloration. For secondary button, you would do the same. This is a highly used standard option of having one have a background and one have just a border. So feel free to replicate this. Then we have action links. The color of your action links text is the same that will be used for hyperlinks throughout your website. You can set that by setting the text color. The arrow, you can adjust the color and the size, and then on hover, Once more, I suggest keeping the color standard and then just adjusting the opacity. Then we have checklists. Checklists, you'll set up the fonts, bottom spacing. Bottom spacing allows you to keep a lot more space between these. So if you'd like a more stylistic checklist where there's a good amount of space between the items, feel free to set up a high bottom spacing number. And the preview here will show you exactly how that will look. But everything else here is standard for the text. Then the icon is the same as we saw with the action links arrow, where we'll set up the size. And you can set the color. Then in the header navigation, this is where things get fun. So first we'll set up our links, which are pretty standard. I would suggest keeping this a neutral color so they don't draw the eye too often. You don't want somebody's eye getting distracted from the on-page content and always looking at the header. You want this to be a pretty in the background thing. Because realistically, from a UX experience, somebody will automatically look at your header to see where they can go next on your website. So the header doesn't really need to draw attention. It just needs to do its job of helping them navigate the website. Just keep that in mind when making this style. Then for the action, this is where we can select from it being a primary button, an action link, or secondary button. You'll notice when I set it to action link, I can completely customize how it looks. And then primary button, it'll duplicate your settings that you set for your primary button. That's a really great option for having a very loud call to action. Then on hover, this is going to impact these links and not the action link. You can set the same color and then just a lower opacity. For footer navigation, this is where we'll set up the font settings for our links. These are our links, and then our categories, which are right here. And then we have our on hover settings, which once more, we just adjust for opacity. I know I went through some of these pretty quick because they're pretty repetitive of the same settings. So if you need something really more in depth, please feel free to go to help.unstack.com for a written explanation. But I do hope that this video helps walk you through what you should be filling out. Thanks.